But Ajahn doesn't like talking much about jhana, so I won't say very much about it.
Okay, you know everything.
So I know what I'm talking about properly.
Wait until I have problems about Chan.
Yes.
What about you, Martin?
Sorry?
What about you? You have Chan, why don't you ask for that? Chan could explain for us.
I don't know.
Can you tell us about your experience?
Later.
And what Ajahn teaches is samadhi. And samadhi seems to be the method of doing the practice which is sufficient to bring insight, to develop, sufficient if one develops wisdom, to use with the wisdom in order to develop understanding of Dhamma. And because that's sufficient, I don't think Ajahn wants to go on to more than that. But he's also said that people who naturally go the way of jhana, they must go that way. So it's not worth other people trying to develop. Which looks as though there's something in the way of natural ability in this. So, but I wouldn't like to say that's true. I'm not sure.
I think I read in I think it was Fourth Dhamma from Ajahn, where he said that there is a difference between samadhi and jhana.
Yes.
And it's easily when you get into samadhi, you can get to switch over to the jhanic state.
Yeah, maybe.
But that's the only thing I found. So
Yeah.
then he goes on with samadhi.
I'm not sure. But anyway, the thing is one of the things I think which is obvious about jhana is it brings all sorts of psychic powers. Or it can anyway. It can bring psychic power. And because of this it's a wonderful tool for the kilesas to play with. Kilesas can take hold of it, use it for all sorts of things. And this doesn't do anything in the way of trying to get rid of the kilesas. It doesn't help. Because of that, it's far better to keep one's mind on samadhi. And the process of samadhi leading to understanding, leading to the insight, the development of wisdom. Because that does what it should do. And by doing that, one knows one's on the right path. Also, in the Eightfold Path, it doesn't say anything about jhana, but it does say about right samadhi. Stick to that. At least one knows what one's dealing with there.
Yeah, but on the contrary, in the suttas, especially from the Majjhimani side, when he develops the way to liberation, he always goes through the jhana, to the fourth jhana, and then develops the insight. So
Certainly there's a lot about it in the suttas.
Even explaining them quite thoroughly.
Yes.
At least the fourth, the Rupa jhana.
It explains, but I'm not sure that it's thoroughly. Possibly the Buddha himself explained it thoroughly, that down the ages it's been formalized.
I don't know, but in the Digha Nikaya, I think in the first or second sutta there is quite a few pages on it.
Yes, it gives several similes. Similes of what the jhanas are like, but the thing is that even with those, it's a bit difficult to be sure what we're talking about.
I think the book says Samadhi in the Eightfold Path. How they describe this chant, the fourth chant. Is it the same thing? I think. But it doesn't say, only that it doesn't say that it's chant, in fact it's a chant.
I'm not sure.
So that's why it seems that the Buddha trying to didn't mention so much about this. In practice.
Myself, I keep an open mind.
I'll show you.
So let it be only optional things.
Yeah. May possibly be something to do with that. The ability to go deeply into concentration. No, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think it's necessary. Yes, there's a lot in the Dhamma which one can speculate about. And one doesn't really know what the truth of it is. It isn't so much that it might be untrue, one doesn't know how to interpret it. Because some of the things are very difficult to interpret. And because of that we have to keep on with our own kilesas. They're there. And they're the trouble. And this is where we have to look more than anything else. And when one looks at the kilesas, they come under the heading of tanha, primarily. And there's the three basic factors of hate, of tanha: greed, hate, and delusion. The greed and the hate, we probably know a fair amount about it. The delusion, it's the difficult one to see. This is the one that catches us every time. Delusion is our worldview. It's all our beliefs, our ideas, our views, about everything. And all these are stuck in our memory. And this is the importance of memory. They're stuck in our memory, and we remember things, we remember situations, because we want security. For example, you come to this place here, and after having sort of searched around, you remember where things are, you know where to look for them. Everything there is stuck in our memory. And we search around quite frequently to make sure that everything's where it should be. And we compare with memory all the time. We compare against our memory whether things are as we see them. If something's changed, we think, why? What's happened here? Why is that? And we then readjust memory accordingly. But we always want the assurance that things are more or less permanent. And we're always looking for permanence in this. And the permanence is that our memory tells us things are as they were. They're there as they were yesterday, or 10 minutes ago, whatever it is. And we're always trying to fix the world around us, our environment, so that we know it, so that we can feel secure in it. The trouble is, that wouldn't matter much, but it also deludes us into the idea that it's all permanent. But in fact it's not. Everything's changing the whole time. Even if we don't see it changing, the changes are there. And one must realize that change doesn't mean just changes out in the world. It means changes in oneself. So when one sees things from a different position or at a different time, there's a change. And the change is in oneself, so one receives it. And that's where the change, the real meaning of anicca comes. The changingness, because all changing within oneself the whole time. Even one sees things in the past, one sees something in the past and then one remembers it. By the time one sees it again, one's grown older. One's learned more about all sorts of things. So the things not seem the same as it were. Sometimes it's long enough and we recognize that it doesn't look like that. We see something that we remember from our childhood and it seems different, it seems much bigger or much more imposing or less imposing or whatever it happens to be. It seems to have changed. But in fact, it really will change more. And the change in ourselves is much more important than the change outside. Changes in our mind, in our attitude, in our understanding, what we see, everything like that. But then we see things, we compare them, and we see that the comparison holds up mostly. See, it's a comparison, so we say it's the same.
But then we get the idea of permanence. And we fix on it, and we fix it as permanent. And then when it really does change, a bomb falls on us or whatever happens, then we're really upset. Because things have changed suddenly. We say, oh, it was there just a short while ago, thinking that the thing's been there for ages and ages, whereas in fact it isn't. It's something, it's just the appearances are similar. So things change the whole time. And because of this, we tend to get deluded by this factor in ourselves, this way of seeing things, way of understanding. We have to do that. We want the security. Without the security there, it's difficult all the time. We have to be watching everything. And of course this happens when you go to the forest. Somebody goes into the forest, there's nothing familiar there. Nothing they can sort of pin onto and say, well, that's the same as it was yesterday. And mostly even that happens from day to day, things change. And you can never tell when a tiger's going to pop up or a big snake's going to come or something of that sort. You just don't know. Because of that, the security is cut through, the tendency to think of permanence drops away, and one's in a better position to see the anicca, to realize the insecurity that one has all the time, really. And fundamentally, we're always insecure. Nobody knows when a blood clot's going to go into the heart. You just don't know. It's always possible. We know that at any time it can happen. And this body is a dangerous thing. And we have to try and look after it in ways that are best for it. And we also have to realize that this day may be my last. I've got to keep my mind on Dhamma. And that way one can start trying to defeat the kilesas. Trouble is though we don't, we forget most of the time. So if one can sort of live one's life as though every day is one's last day, it's very good. Who was it? Dr. Johnson, wasn't it? He said, the knowledge that on the morning you're going to be executed sharpens the mind wonderfully. But really that's how we should be. We should be like that all the time. It's difficult.
Yeah, we're stuck in terms of tomorrow.
Yes. Ajahn talks a lot about Pachupana Dhamma. Dhamma in the present. And this is where one should be, as much of the time as one can. Because if one keeps one's mind in the present, then one's worries of the past and the future drop away, straight away. And because the mind's just on this now, yeah. And one sees then, past is a fiction. Past has no reality. Future's a fiction. It has no reality. The only reality is this moment. That's all. In this moment, the concept's either changing or not changing. There's nothing here to pin onto at all. And if one can keep as near as one can to that moment, one will find that the mind will sharpen up, that the samadhi probably won't be very difficult. Also, mindfulness will be there, sati. Because if you try and keep the mind in the present, you've got to pin onto what's there, there's nothing else to pin onto. And the mind likes to pin onto things. Natural for the mind wanting to fix on something all the time. So if you keep it in the present, you've got to fix onto what's right here in front of you. What's present all the time. And nothing else. Of course, to get to the real present, that I think is lokuttara dhamma. That goes beyond the kilesas, and that's difficult. But even keeping it into the present as much as one can, it's still very valuable. Very good thing to do. And keeping the mind in the present also overcomes the fear of death. Because if one's in the present, one knows the future's illusory, so death just doesn't exist at the moment. That's all that matters.
You said the other day that if we feel foggy and we are mindful that we realize that we feel foggy, it's still okay. And if we are lazy, be mindful we are still lazy, or if we are sleepy, that we are sleepy, it's okay.
If you can really be mindful, it's all right, because the mindfulness will overcome the state.
Oh yes.
Automatically.
That's true. As soon as you try to look at it.
Yeah, once you really try to look at it, and you try and get hold of that and see what it really is. You can't do it when you're in a foggy state, but it automatically overcomes it.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's true.
It's always the way with practically everything. If you've got any state that's a problem, and one turns and looks at that state itself, the problem tends to diminish. The thing that keeps the state going is if one tries to get away from it by thinking outside or trying to find something to change one's attention, something to interest oneself. That usually doesn't stop it. At least it's a temporary cure, even if it cures it. And if a person feels bored, what is boredom? Boredom really means you can't fix the mind on anything. Because the one thing that brings sukha is concentration. And boredom means that the mind is dispersed. And you can't find anything to bring up interest and to bring up any sukha at all. When the mind is like that, it's bored. Now, if you turn and examine that place, you're immediately bringing up something to concentrate on. And that tends to get rid of the state itself. It's always asking oneself, why do people go and climb mountains? Things of that sort. To me it's pretty obvious. I mean, some people have said, well, just because they're there, but it's hardly a good reason. The real reason would seem to be that when you're climbing a mountain, you've got to be concentrated. If you don't, you fall down. So you've got to be concentrated. And this drives one into concentration, and it keeps the kilesas out of the way. And because of that, the person feels happy. And they like the happiness, the contentment it brings. Because the mind's in the present. Nowhere else. You can't afford to have it anywhere else. If you're climbing up a sort of vertical cliff like this, you've got to keep your mind on what you're doing. Now that seems to me the obvious reason why people do that. People do things that interest them. The things that interest them tend to concentrate the mind. So they like doing those things. And if as long as they're not wrong sila, it's probably a good thing. It doesn't matter if they do it. And if people like to go climbing mountains, they can. And not me.
Dive to the deepest of the ocean.
Yeah, some people talk me the things they do. People do find strange things to do. Then
Ajahn Panyavaddo talks about it's very smart He said that the mountain so high is still lower than a man who's sitting up at the top.
But whatever we do, our motive really is that of dukkha, or getting away from dukkha. In fact, this is what everyone's trying to do the whole time. Whether they're Buddhist or not makes no difference. All the time they're finding dukkha, and all the time they're searching for a way out. Even if it's just a little irritation, or a scratch, it's the same thing. Even that. And whatever it is, trying to find a way out of dukkha. It's as though we've got a pair of scales inside to balancing things up all the time. And dukkha's going down on one side, and we're trying to balance it up all the time on the other side. We have to find the right weights to put on that side. Just like that. We test the dukkha inside. This is really what Vedana is for, feeling. Feeling is the test. Test the situation. Test whether we like it, whether we don't like it. Whether it's going to be harmful to us or not. In other words, whether it's going to bring dukkha or not. And all the time we're using that to test situations, the whole time. And depending on that test will depend what we do. We then have a motive for trying to overcome it. If it's more dukkha, if it's sukha, we try to increase it. Whatever it is. And we're testing all the time. Then there are all sorts of things that get so much small and large, same things working all the time. Again, mostly if there's a pleasant sensation, if that sensation goes on for a long time, it's no longer pleasant. Tends to turn to being painful. What we don't realize most of the time is how much of it is internal to ourselves. How much of what we know and see and think and do internal to ourselves all the time. Of course, with sensation, with feeling. There's no feeling out there in the world. Feelings are all internal. Whole thing is internal. And I mean, if something comes and hits one, that thing hasn't got feeling in it, and where it hits hasn't got feeling in it. All that happens is a reaction. But dependent on that, we experience feeling. The feeling is something peculiar to ourselves. It's something you can't even define to anyone else. You know it all inside. And really it's all things, they're all internal. And mostly we see the world in a very special way. It's in our own way that we see the world, and we understand the world. Seeing, hearing, smell, taste, touch. All of it. I mean, what is taste? You have roast beef, or a chili sauce, something of that sort. But what is there out in the world there? There's no taste in that beef, there's no taste in that chili, all there is chemicals. It's only when it contacts you that those chemicals have a reaction. From that reaction you get the taste. We say that the taste's in the food, but it isn't. The taste's in ourselves. We react to the food. So it's all internal. The smell's the same. Same thing. So we can really realize that. I mean, we can know it intellectually quite easily, but to realize it, then the attachments tend to drop away a bit. Same is true of seeing. We see it changes when it goes into the eye. We get image on the eye, and it changes into nervous impulses, nervous codes. And what the brain does with it, we don't quite know. It sort of changes that somehow. From that we see things. We don't really know what we see. It's all internal. It's hard to realize that because we've got such a long history of having thought of the world being out there and other people being out there and things in the world being out there, to realize that all this is something that's internal. I won't say all internal. There may be a world out there, I don't know. But it's not what we think it is. This is hard to realize. It's not easy at all.
Like my teacher was telling us, when he was young, he watched the television and he said, everything is real in there. The men moving, people running, horses, and then he thought it was real. He went and touched it, it was nothing.
Yes.
When he was young, he said, this is the delusion that we are having.
Apparently, once there was a cinema in the village, Ajahn told us this, and in the cinema there was a horse coming towards the screen, you see. They had obviously got a little box underneath the thing there. And this man in the audience says, "Oh, look out, look out! It's dangerous!" Everyone burst out roaring laughter. He took it as being real.
It's like we all, by all the, everything is a shadow of the citta.
Yes.
We seem to be engrossed in that, in believing the shadow of the citta, the certain and time.
It is, yes. Yes, it all comes from the citta, really. The thing is that all the senses go in, and the sense organs are different. The eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, are different sense organs. But the nervous system at the back of it is very similar in all forms, all of them. And we must assume that what happens in the brain is probably analogous amongst all of them. It's the same sort of thing that's happening. Now we build up the world on this. And when the brain's finished with it, we can say that it hands it over to Vijnana. And Vijnana, Rapu, perceives it and knows it. Now this is where the knowing comes from, in the Vijnana, which is a form of the citta.
So is that where we find the difference in each person?
No, the difference in each person will be in the whole of the five khandhas. For instance, in the background memory, in the way they tend to use sankhara, thinking. Because when the thing's known, then it has to be identified against memory. And the way we identify it will depend on our own past. The different people may identify the thing in quite different ways. And people have different likes and dislikes, so one thing comes up and the person likes it, another person doesn't like it. So we get differences.
So this is in the perception.
Perception, as far as I can make out here, is really vijnana. It's a vijnana perception. Sanya is memory. In the West, it's become translated as perception.
Yeah, that's how they translate.
That's wrong. This came about, of course, because the first translations that were done in the West were done by scholars. And all they learnt Greek and Roman and European philosophy. And from this, they tried to apply that to the 500, and they used the word perception. But it isn't the meaning at all. And actually the Sinhalese have taken it up from that as well. in surroundings, taking the same thing up. And it's all wrong. It's memory. But it's the whole overall function of memory, not just mere remembering. Perception of anything is vijnana. So perceiving it's perceiving and knowing. Although consciousness is a better translation, because consciousness means some skill to know, which it's really knowing together with the whatever it is, the object. And it's a very close translation of vijnana, consciousness.
So when they explain the mental formation, they said that's where the karma is born.
That's where karma is born, yeah. Because that's the active part of the mind. But it's formed because that's where the Pungtang takes place, the decorating and changing, and building up. So it's all built up. The rest of it's all providing data for that, for the sankhara. I mean, what happens? Sensations come in, vijnana knows them. They're tested against memory to identify them. Then they're tested against feeling to see whether these things are I don't like, whatever they are, whether they're pleasant feeling or painful feeling. And then the sankhara gets hold of them and decide, this I don't like, I'm going to do this or that. It's very rough, it's a rough way of putting it, but that's the sort of thing that happens.
Yeah, because they explain that the contact and then vedana and then perception, mental formation and consciousness come last.
No, consciousness can't come last.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering too, because
there must be there must be the knowing before anything can happen. There must be the contact. But the thing is, it would seem that when we see an object, supposing if we use sense of sight, when we see an object, if it's a very familiar object, there'd just be a reference to memory, and that would bring up the whole background memory. And so the thing is seen in a quite broad context. If it's unfamiliar, it has to go to the details of it, building it up into a picture. And each time it builds up, it takes the details, it has to go and identify them with memory. And that goes through the whole process all the time, till it's got enough to identify them.
so that will be by the childhood learning.
In childhood learning would probably be something like that, yes. But as I see it, you can't detail the process too much, because the memory, the process that goes on in mind will function according to what the situation is. And one case it'll go through the whole process very accurately, another time it'll probably go through parts of it and just finding out about parts of it, doing all sorts of things. It's not like a machine that goes through the same thing every time, same way every time. Mind isn't like that. You only have to look at an object and keep a watch on the way your eye follows over it, the way your eye moves over it. It jumps all over the place. But generally it'll follow the outline shape of an object. If it's a long object like this, it tends to go up and down much more. If it's a broad fat object, it goes round it and from side to side more. It depends on the shape of the object, what happens, what it does. But certainly we're not machines.
Can we practice by looking at things and know what they are and just drop it there?
I think only if your mind, if your chitta is fixed internally, maybe everything. mostly it's very difficult to do that because it will go to feelings automatically. I think it's on so much of our sensation, it's automatic what happens. We've got habitual ways of doing things, and that tends to follow through more readily than anything else. Tend to go by habit. But it's worth trying to look into one's sensation. It can show one a lot. It can also show one where some of the kilesas come from.
I find if I don't look, I look at once and I know it, and I don't look second time. Then the thoughts then become in.
Yes. In other words, there's a wanting to check up uncertainty.
That reminds me so much of what the Buddha said about guarding the sense doors. Like keeping just, I hear something, it's just a sound, and stopping there.
Yeah.
And I think with hearing, some sounds I feel it's easier than I find with looking. Looking goes to correct the perception barrier.
Well, also you can shut your eyes. It's very difficult to shut your ears.
But with hearing, with some sounds I react. I can see that.
Yeah.
And with some sounds I just don't react at all.
Yeah.
It feels like, with hearing, I have both experiences. I find it easier to somehow do that. Not all the time, so it's like just some sounds. But with seeing, it's really difficult. When I open my eyes, it's so quick, that kind of making of that form into something.
See it as being internal requires a lot of work. It has to go through it time after time after time. And work at it quite a lot. One can. It's not easy.
Yeah, I just had
and even then, the tendency is to switch back to the normal method. It's very, very quick, very easy, very simple. Just so it goes back again automatically.
I just had once experience of walking during a retreat and walking into the bathroom and looking at the soap, and the soap had some hairs in it. And the first thing I was, disgusting. The second moment, the mind switched into just seeing form and color.
Yeah.
And there was no feeling, it just went right in.
Yeah.
And the next time, disgusting. Hairs in the soap.
That's why, at one of the retreat we were talking about when we do the 32 parts of the body, people say, they have beautiful hair, lovely hair, they look after the hair, good and have it permanent, done all sorts of things. But if one hair fall on the soup, they said, oh, yuck. That's the one.
Well, you can also ask, supposing you don't wash the hair, what happens to it? I mean, if you just leave it naturally, is it beautiful? I mean, it tends to get matted and sweaty. Not so good.
But did the Buddha give any kind of special instruction on how one can actually achieve a type of mindfulness and concentration, that kind of guarding of the senses?
Yes. On the guarding of the senses, that comes under the heading of the Indriya Samara. That's the guarding of the faculties, Samara, restraining the faculties. First thing is not to let one's senses look about or go about too much. Keep them here. When walking, just keep one gaze down. So one cloud ends the head, like that. One shouldn't just be searching around, looking, thinking, hearing all the time. But keep it inside. And I mean, it's there automatically in the practice of mindfulness too. Restraint of senses. If you're mindful, your senses will be restrained. In the practice, keeping the practice and learning to keep inside, keep the chitta inside, That will restrain the senses too. So, although he did say a certain amount directly about restraining the senses, that came under Sila, the heading of Sila. But the whole of the practice will bring that about anyway. The only reason why our senses tend to be unrestrained is because we're interested. We want to know everything that's round about us. Again, it's partly the feeling of security, lack of security. But partly also tanha. We're sort of thinking, is there something for me in this somewhere? We like to search around. So, one sees the reason why we search like that. One can also see the reason for the restraint of the senses. And it shows up the way to do it. And when there's an inclination to look at something, one deliberately doesn't. It keeps the senses down. Hearing is more difficult because you can't shut your ears just like that.
No, but it's like, I find it very clearly that sometimes my chitta goes out to the sound.
Yeah.
Like something, think about it.
Yeah, one can avoid that.
Or whether it stays inside and just the sound comes and goes and there's no reaction.
Although it is rather difficult when you get these large speakers now.
Not like no, but I can see clearest the difference.
Yes.
Turn the loudspeaker in that.
Yeah.
The loudspeaker must be near to the men's
Although truly speaking, what's out there isn't sound, it's just vibration. Truly speaking, it turns into sound when it gets into us. What gets into the ear is vibration. Then it turns into nervous reaction. But the stimulus is still quite loud sometimes. Quite strong.
If you think in the form of vibration, there seems to be vibration for everything.
Yes, it's about all the time. All the time, vibration. The thing that's interesting though is to see how the chitta can switch from one thing to another. The ear must be hearing the sound the whole time. But if you switch it and hear one sound specifically, the other sounds you don't hear. Because the reason is the vijnana has turned to that. And it requires vijnana to be able to hear. The vijnana isn't, the consciousness isn't on the sound, on the hearing, then it won't hear that. It won't hear anything else. It will just hear that. For instance, if one hears even just one particular chicken crowing, then you can listen just to that one. Other sounds you don't notice. They're still going into the ear, but they're not heard.
Is that because the things have to come in one at a time?
No, it's all, everything's coming in, but the vijnana will only receive what it's concentrating on.
How does it happen? Sometimes there's a sound and for a long time it doesn't bother you. No reaction. And then suddenly it becomes annoying. Why does it
the reason why it doesn't bother one is that in some way vijnana is satisfied somewhere else. If that satisfaction dies away, it can quite easily then go to the sound. And because of the lack of that satisfaction, it finds it very unsatisfying. This is the way we are.
And so it might be very interesting to study pain, to take pain meditation and try to study the 5 khandhas. Like Tanagan Kaus, it's very interesting how he can study the works of the 5 khandhas at the same time.
When there is strong pain, it can come either through illness or through sitting a long time, then one has the opportunity to try and do research into that feeling, the nature of the feeling. But it's got to be researched, it's got to be using wisdom. No good just sitting and bearing it. That doesn't work, that doesn't do anything. If one just puts up with the pain, it may be very noble, but it's not much use. What one's got to do is one's got to be investigating the whole time, checking, seeing it, what it is, what's the difference between the pain and the material substance there. Where is the pain exactly? What sort of a pain is it? And supposing it's on the knee, if you cut the knee open, where would you find the pain? You can't. You can find nerves. Well, we assume the nerves are the things that convey the sensation, but the nerves aren't pain. They're like analogous to electric wires going to the brain, that's all. They just convey the signal. The pain, in fact, we find isn't there at all. Real pain. And the feeling sense is probably the most interesting. Because it's the most, I suppose, the most primitive sense, and it's the most important of all the senses. And you have people who go blind or deaf, or they can't taste or smell anything, but you rarely get anyone who can't feel anything. You don't find there's only one case I've ever heard of. That's the most rare thing.
Is it possible to get away from the body pain by lifting up the mind?
By
lifting up the mind, because like sitting in semi-concentration, like lifting up the mind, and I find that I can sit very long.
Yeah.
To listen to the Dharma talk for 1 hour.
Yes, one undoubtedly can do that. The thing is whether one should. If it's in a case, as you say, like listening to the Dhamma talk, it's probably a good thing to do that. But if you're doing meditation practice, the important thing is to know that feeling. If you can. If you can do it.
I have tried to sit 2 hours in one stretch. And I find that the pain come and go.
Yes.
It's not permanent.
Yes, that's right. Yes. But one must look at the pain and question it. Just to put up with the pain is not enough. That doesn't help. For example, what you can do is say, well, I feel the pain as though it's in the knee there. But where am I? Where am I who feel this pain? Am I in the knee? So, if I'm not in the knee, then the one that feels the pain and the knee are quite separate. Why am I so bothered about it? That's one way you can do it.
Yeah, I find that when I have pain, I said to myself, there's no one to feel the pain.
Yeah,
and the pain seems to drop off, but they come back again.
It comes back again, yes. Yes, it comes back again, but the thing is, what one does here, one shouldn't try and do it in order to get rid of the pain. If one does that, that's tanha. What one should do is to do it in order to get to know that pain, and to realize its nature, get to know what feeling is. We want to know what feeling is. And one can question it in that way. This one that knows the pain, and the pain itself are two separate things. So because of that, well, why am I so worried about this pain? And why do I call this pain, why do I call this feeling pain? There's another I call pleasant. What's the difference? Why should I think of one as being painful, the other one as being pleasant? One searches like that to try and find out what's the difference between the two. Anyone can question, well, this pain here, is it really in the knee? we've searched about all the tissues here, all the bones everywhere. Nowhere can we say that pain is actually there at all. There may be nerves there, there's reaction, and there may be process going on there, and none of those processes are pain. No, they are just mere processes. And the nervous reaction, that comes to the spine and up to the brain. And then there's a reaction in the brain. In that case, should I be feeling it here or should I be feeling it up here? Where is the pain? So anyone can start thinking about it and working out, well, where is this pain? And then the question comes, all right, well, supposing up here, it's up here, then that's where I should be feeling the pain. But why do I feel it down there? Whereas the mechanism of feeling it is up here. There's another question you can ask.
When you think like that, when you think the pain's a bit up here, then there's no pain there anymore.
No, usually, practically, one still feels it there. But you think, well, why do I feel it there? Whereas I should be feeling it up here, because this is where the nerves end of the doctor. So you question that. But then what you question is, well, if it's there, the nerve ending, and I feel it down there, why should I feel that place down there with this pain? You can question that. The answer is interesting.
What is it?
Well, I can tell you, what you find out is that there's a feeling body. It's a mind-made body, which is coincident with this one.
Oh, I could see the connection. It's like something, some connection with the chitta and the pain.
No,
inside it's the pain inside.
You can say it's a phantom body. It's not really a body there at all. What it is a set-up in the mind which stimulates the body.
It's what the memory says that it's the pain. Right?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you've got this mind-made body, which is the body we know is feeling. And then in that body is somewhere, there's this place, location. So we associate that with it. But the thing is that one got to see this for oneself, by investigation. And if one can see that, and realize that the body we really know is the feeling body. It's not the physical body. But you have to see that for yourself.